from around the world. Good day. I'm your host today for another edition of VCTV. Every day here on VCTV, we bring investors from around the world to talk to you, our live audience, about what's happening, the trends, both on a macro and a micro level around the world, and what you need to do if you're looking to make investments or to fundraise as a founder. This is an important show, and we bring all the best and the greatest to you, wherever you may be around the world. And before we get started, like we do on every show, a big thank you to you, our audience, for tuning in. If you like what you hear today, click the subscribe button or give us a thumbs up. Also, a big shout out to Elena and to the entire LA Token team for bringing VC together and to you and all of us in one convenient place. Today's topic is about transportation and supply chains. Two topics we've talked a little bit about here on VCTV, but we're going to go even deeper with some of the latest news and latest things that are happening around the world. For those that haven't heard, we've also just gotten news that Uber is looking to acquire Postmates, and that looks like that's going to go through. Supply chains, as we've talked about, have gone very hyper-local as opposed to very global as they were before. Transportation itself has dramatically changed. Air travel is down 70 to 80% in some places around the world. More people are driving, or are they? What does the future of the technology look like when applied to transportation, to supply chains? When we bring in data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, things that we've talked about regularly here on VCTV. Let's go deeper. Let's start the conversation today. Gentlemen, welcome. Welcome. Alexis, I'd love to start with you if you can. Just a quick introduction, a little background on yourself relevant to transportation and supply chain.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be back. So my name is Alexis Grobar. I spent 10 years at Airbus. I was head of Airbus in Russia for 4 years. And then I'm a serial entrepreneur now in London, investing in aviation, transportation, and logistics. So the subject of today is particularly of interest for me. And my take on it is what's happening in the retail industry with logistics. So I'll bring my experience in this field in France, in the UK, and in Russia.
Wonderful, and welcome back. Excited to dive into all of this as we didn't get a chance to on our last episode with you. So today, excited to unpack that Airbus experience and see where things are going. Paul, welcome to the show. Late night from Singapore, unless you want to tell everybody else you're somewhere else, but I've broken the news. Welcome to the show. If you can, a little introduction, a little background on yourself. Make sure you unmute.
Yeah, hi. Great to be with all of you today. I started in the logistics industry, shipping, traditional APL, NYK line. I came out to Asia, visited a lot of factories, worked on solutions for major global companies. And then I was involved with the IPO of Li & Fung Group division. And then I went to India to start a business with the Mittal family. And we took public on the Bombay Stock Exchange, very disruptive logistics parks, railroad, IT company, all integrated together. And now I also mentor tech startups in the Asia region who are looking to disrupt logistics and other areas of the industry with blockchain, et cetera. So I'm a big believer that disruption is coming, and the recent events simply move that in a faster track than we had anticipated. Great to be with all of you today.
Absolutely. As we've had as a common theme here on VCTV, digitization has been accelerated. And I think that conversation is going to continue, or that theme will continue today and with these topics. So welcome to the show, Paul. Christian, welcome as well. A little background on yourself and a little introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Elena. So I'm leading Renault, Nissan, and Mitsubishi's corporate venture capital arm. So what does it mean? We're investing in startup companies that are disrupting the status quo of the business. And the business is quite broad these days. It's anything from the Ubers and mobility services of the world into how is our company doing logistics supply chain. So we really touch the both ends of the metal, more from a startup innovation, trying to find those companies globally. So we invested already in China and Israel, Europe, and North America. So very much a global focus, since it's a global problem.
Wonderful. Welcome to the show. And Bernard, and last but not least, a little introduction, a little background on yourself.
Hello everybody. So I'm the upstart from Paris in urban logistics. So we are a pretty young company. I'm a repeat entrepreneur, by the way, and I won't repeat what has been said, and I agree totally. So we see this period as a wealth of opportunities, especially as logistics are back into the heart of major cities. That's where we are, that's where we strive, and it's coming today from every way, be it from retailers, be it from freight companies, brands, you name it, everybody is back into the city. I don't know whether it's going to last for decades, but that's a trend today, definitely. And we're part of it with, of course, we have to, with AI. I'm old enough to call it expert systems. But that's the way it goes to optimize whether you're going to take a bicycle, a pedestrian, or a light vehicle to move your wares around.
Wonderful. Well, guys, welcome all to the show. And Bernard, let's start with you with our first question. Just kind of, what is your view on where things are with transportation and supply chains around the world? You know, in the last 6 to 8 months, we've had a lot happen. As I said, common theme is digitization has been accelerized, but where are we today, and where do you think we're going forward here in terms of transportation supply chain?
I can only use my own experience, I would say. When I talk to a manager of logistics, well, everything is almost fine and they survive. And when I talk to the CEO or the owner of the company, they say, my model is disrupted totally, I'm dead, I need to reinvent myself. So some populations have very different views, but what we see is that at the board level, everybody is really preoccupied to reinvent its logistics systems. Green is not the new black yet, to be honest. Cost reduction is important, but that's basically what matters today. And also how to deal with the municipalities which want ever greener approaches, of course, without paying the full price, at least in the beginning.
Absolutely. Paul, same to you. I mean, you're sitting in the cornerstone of Southeast Asia and really Asia as a whole. Where are things with transportation and supply chain? As I know there's a lot happening locally on the ground, or has been for the past few years, but what are you seeing?
Well, I think the model's going through incredible speed of transformation. Singapore, of course, has been a center of excellence with regional SCM hubbing, and virtual manufacturing came out of Li and Feng. So we've seen a lot of very innovative events in Asia that may not be visible in the US or European side. But I think the real trends now are with technology. We're seeing drones doing inventory stock takes in warehouses. We're going to have 50,000 black warehouses without humans in the next 3 to 4 years. And I think that trend of taking humans out of the warehouse with Swisslog and other technologies is inevitable. So that is an incredible transformation of logistics. I think we're going to have 3D printing coming much faster than people are aware, where you'll shop online with a virtual image, and you'll literally have products 3D printed and delivered within your own city. So we're going to have a mix of global, unique supply chains, and we're going to have simultaneously close in-city production hubs that are literally going to 3D print and use advanced technology. And there will be a synergy between the two. And I think we're seeing blockchain developing. You know, the word's been used very widely, but I see two trends. One is collaboration with major players like IBM and Maersk doing the shipping initiative. And there are a number of examples of that space evolving and opening up to the industry. And then what I call the razor blades, which are the thousands, which I know all of us are involved in different ways also, thousands of these innovative startups that are exploring blockchain, AI, robotics, and I think they're going to completely shock and slice into the major industry players and force transformation much more rapidly than anyone's anticipating. So I'm very optimistic about the speed of transformation, but it'll be a combination of large global players with the capital to invest and unique razor blades breaking out. Many will fail, but the ones that succeed will play major roles in further transforming the industry.
Absolutely agree. And I've seen a number of those locally and throughout Asia. But before we go on, I want to come back to something you mentioned, because I don't think it's very well understood unless you're in manufacturing, is what are the kind of black warehouses or the black packaging centers? If you could just kind of define that just a slight bit for people.
Well, I'll jump to two pieces, because when we talk about supply chain, we talk about products. So already 30 years ago, a company called Li & Fung, which I used to work for, had 20,000 virtual factories in 58 countries. They literally would take the excess capacity. Foxconn replicated that model in tech. Now smaller players are playing with that excess capacity space. So the first trend that's been refined over 30 years is virtual manufacturing. And that will now be extended into 3D manufacturing, which will allow much smaller players to produce products and distribute. With the warehouses, we're moving into an environment where right now we're mixing humans and robots in warehouses so that we have racking, automated. I used to run a major 44,000 pallet ASRS. So the machine would move 44,000 pallets. We had an integration with customs, and we were feeding product to 14 countries. But we're moving into a point where human physical checking of inventory is being done literally by flying drones inside a warehouse. The racks are being moved by robots. The picking is being done by robot arms. So if you look at Amazon as an example, the human element is moving more and more to the pick and pack touch point, and all the rest is being done by automation. So the black warehouse literally takes automation to a level where you have minimal humans inside, and the robots are handling the in processing, the out processing, the pick and pack of products. And it's estimated there will be over 50,000 of those within just the next few years. And then that trend will move very wide. So I really don't think people in our traditional logistics industry are anywhere near prepared for the shock waves that will provide.
Wow. Yeah, that's actually pretty big. I wasn't prepared for that either. So thank you for sharing that with us. Alexis, to you, same question. What are you seeing as kind of the current state around supply chain and transportation? You've got this experience, this vast experience in both areas. What are you seeing as kind of the current state of things?
Well, let me start with, I think, the airline industry, which is obviously in turmoil, and with what's happening at the moment, we see a lot of airlines reinventing themselves. You know, the low-cost airlines being at the verge of bankruptcy. We see flag carriers being basically going public and becoming governmental owned. And we see a lot of airlines going bankrupt. So I think the whole airline industry, and I spent 10 years of my life working for 25 airlines. And I own an airline myself, both private jets and airliners, commercial airliners. There is a big question of what's going to be the future of airlines. And I think the future would be most probably green airplanes with no pilots. There was a shortage of pilots before this crisis. And now we see a lot of pilots. EasyJet just fired 600 pilots last week. So there is a lot of things changing, but I think the future of airlines is most probably airplanes without pilots and green airplanes. On the transportation side, also with my Airbus hat and with what I looked at with Airbus Ventures, there is a lot of interest with helicopters and drones. So a bit like Uber Lyft and what's happening in the drone sector for transporting people. And I think the future of urban mobility, but Christian will most probably speak about it, is fascinating. And I've been involved in 3 projects here in London, Paris, where basically few manufacturers were looking at new types of helicopters without pilots to transport people. And that will come very quickly in 10 cities. I think in next 3-5 years, you will be flying basically without any pilots, something which is not a helicopter, but something new. So that would be my take on transportation. On logistics, and I've been involved the last 5 years with the Mullier family in Auchan, Decathlon, and Leroy Merlin, a big French conglomerate. We see a lot of things happening with basically logistical company becoming, enormous shop becoming a sort of holes for logistics. So I think the whole retail industry is in turmoil, and they are trying to reinvent themselves what to do with those huge shops and malls, which are not working anymore. And I think the online sales will transform all that. So briefly, that's what I see from where I sit.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of talk around, or speculation, I should say, speculation here in the United States around shopping malls and what the future of those could look like, along with movie theaters. One of the conversations that has gone around is that big retailers that are no longer around or dying off in shopping malls, that they actually could be the future of logistics centers, right? So that there was rumor Amazon was looking at a few of these big retailers that were dying off or going into bankruptcy, and that Amazon would actually leverage them as a distribution center, right? So they would be a storefront similar to Amazon Go or some of the other stores, continue operations as normally, but majority of the store would actually operate as a logistics hub to bring in and out of inventory, because you've got land, you've got plenty of you've already got the infrastructure built in place, and you've got plenty of retail space or warehouse space, to Paul's point, either for people or for machines to actually handle this new level. So you can go very hyper local around your distribution center very quickly, because there's shopping malls, at least in the United States, in almost every major city, if not tier 2 city as well, that you can quickly light up in that sense. So I think what you're seeing seems to be very on par with what else we're seeing here in the world. And Paul's shaking his head, so I think he agrees.
I think also 3D manufacturing centers.
Yeah, so that's another one. And Bernard is poking at me to get that same point. And Bernard, just unmute and go for it.
Yeah, I just want to give my quick take on malls and real estate in Europe, which is, well, we're not as flexible as the US. We don't go bankrupt as quickly. And what I see is that most of the real estate investors, well, they have already discounted their portfolios, especially the second level kind of real estate. So we see that in Paris. If you're not prime, you're almost dead. You can't rent it again to any brand or any retailer. That's what's going on today. At the same time, it takes us quite a way to transform a mall into a logistics platform. And well, I can tell you, we've done it once. So it's complicated. And what I hear from one of the major operators is, instead of having people go to the mall, they want to have the products from the mall to go to the client instead. So they wish to extend, that's at least the vision, they wish to extend I would say their footprint, trying to grab people on their way to the work or home, back and forth with the products that they may have seen on their smartphone instead of the shop. And we see all the lines blurring between all these elements. There's a good example, which is some of the new train stations in Paris, which are going to be more and more a mall. Airports are already malls, but even train stations are going to become more and more big malls in cities, and with lots of traffic around. So all this is, and the retailers are, you can say they are lost today. At last, they found out that transportation is really a big cost. Some of them have not yet, but transportation is a big part of logistics, and they have quite a trouble to get out of the model, to redesign the model, and basically to shed the investment they've made in trucks, for instance. That's the reality we see, and we try to help them move forward with a consulting firm, so with practical solutions. And there are a lot of practical solutions, but it takes a awful lot of time, even with the surge in e-commerce that we see today.
Right. Well, it surged so quickly too, right? A huge surge, lots of moving pieces, and even to your point of product going to people, I think this is a trend some foresaw a few years ago. I mean, even Alibaba, Jack Ma introduced the whole idea of, online to offline, O to O, where you could start shopping online and then walk in the store and complete your process, right? Or you could do all of your shopping online, go to the store and it's ready for you in a cart, or you're in the store shopping, click on what you need on an app. It's all packed and produced behind the scenes, put into a crate and delivered to you within an hour's time. So you don't actually have to carry anything home. So I think you're spot on. All three of you thus far are pretty spot on into what we've seen and kind of where we're going. Now, Christian, take us home. Where are we? This is all built up to you, so don't let us down here. But truth be told, where are you seeing the current state of transportation and supply chains today on a global scale?
Yeah, thank you. Tough luck for me following the three great speakers, but maybe on the supply chain, just and I have less of the factory perspective. I maybe have more the overall system point of view here. And one thing that we see needs to happen now is building up resilience. I think it has been extremely clear in the health system that we don't have any resilience there in the supply chain to react to a crisis moment like that. But I also think this needs to be changed. We really build everything around one supplier, cost optimized to the penny. And I'm not sure if that's the right strategy for all the industries in the future. I think supply chain needs to be more resilient, be able to, or production and supply chain attached to that needs to be more resilient around industries where always diseases and global events can always happen more and more. And that's nothing new. I mean, we always had earthquakes and strikes and all of this, but the impact is just getting more and more, and the systems are not connected enough. So really visibility and transparency. And I can for sure talk about the automotive industry. It's a lot of paper and pen, old school processes. So we talk about black warehouses, but then you also have the other reality where the guys that are manufacturing, getting the goods to their manufacturing plant are calling up the manufacturers, the suppliers. What's the situation? You had a fire, so what does it mean for me? I mean, there's no reason today that we still have to take our phone to get this type of information. And on the mobility side, and there were lots of interesting comments already. I would maybe be more cautious about the statement. I think, Alexis, you mentioned it, and no pilots. Yes, for sure, we will not have pilots, but we will have people in there. I think humans generally feel more comfortable if there is a responsible person, if there's a problem that they can talk to. At least in the next couple of years, I think people will need this. And by the way, I don't think policies will allow immediately for those applications. So at least the companies I talk to, they often ask for a technician or some sort of a customer kind of a person in the vehicle. They're not called pilots anymore, but essentially they need to do similar functions. And I think having flying cars, as you said, Alexis, is I think also is coming relatively quickly, but autonomous flying cars or helicopter or whatever will probably take a little bit longer. But it's an important access to go, not just go wide, and because we don't have space in cities. If you look at Paris, I think is a example of what will happen more and more. I still have opinions of this, but certainly it's a trend that we see globally, and so we need to react to that. In terms of mobility, I think it needs to be flexible and it needs to be on demand. It needs to be combination of different modes, depending on your in retirement, you might not
Hey,
be
Christian,
the
we're having a
one
little
getting
bit
on a
of,
kick scooter, but
oh, there we go. Sorry, we're having a little bit of connection issue.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not. It's not your fault. It's the internet's fault. You're totally fine. I think we may have lost you, but if I was capturing, okay? Yeah. If you want, turn off your video for just a minute and go ahead and finish your point. But from what I was taking notes on, it sounded like you were saying from a transportation standpoint or mobility, it needs to have flexibility built in, and that there is going to be more of an on-demand model coming, and that if you're in retirement, you may have a different use case than someone, for instance, who's more active on a daily basis. And that's about where you dropped off.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle, and I hope you can hear me better now. So perfect. Yeah, I mean, I think really the importance this year is that we're not stuck in those old models anymore, where you are either stuck in a 3-year lease or you're buying your mode of transportation, but you're buying access, you're buying miles or kilometers. All of those concepts will drive adoption. And I think it's really, transportation is a hyper local thing. It's not airlines. I think is very different. You're connecting cities and you can standardize a lot, even though you have very complex local operations. But if you're in Paris versus New York City versus Singapore, you have massively different cities, different expectation, different cultures, different weathers, different street conditions. In New York, you have potholes where you can bury people in there, versus Singapore, probably much cleaner and better equipped, also from probably one of the first cities to do 5G. And I mean, all of those things will help drive adoption of modern mobility services from what we have seen in the industry.
How long do you think that adoption curve may be? And I ask, I'm from the Midwest. I'm from the state of Michigan, where the auto industry is life. I mean, let's be very honest. I've been very fortunate to make several investments in companies in the mobility and transportation space over the last 10 years. And a lot of it's great, but that being said, the curve continues to be very long. People don't seem to want to adopt, and maybe that's more here in the US, which I will add, as I've seen in Asia and I've seen in Europe, along with even other places around South America, Africa, and in Australia, are totally fine with different types of mobility models. But in the US, it's still very, I want to own my vehicle and I don't want to pay for miles, right? I go to Hertz, I go to a car rental to pay for miles, and even then, that model has been misbanned. So how long do you think this type of trend is going to take to really adopt? And I want to come back to all of you and get your opinion on this new mobility model of, kind of going by miles and being hyper local, because it is possible. I mean, people in major cities, before I get to Christian, most major cities are leveraging taxis, they're leveraging public transportation, bicycles, and on-demand services like Uber and Lyft more than they are car ownership as the costs come down. So Christian, and then Alexis, I'll come to you in just a second. So Christian.
Yeah, maybe an example. I made an investment when I was still at BMW's venture fund. And myself, I'm German, so I have more of the European context, but living in the US for 10 years. So I guess I'm a little bit hybrid now. But we looked at a company in the carpooling, which is one of those very emotional topics in the US, where carpooling hasn't really been a thing. It's supposed to be dangerous. It's supposed to be like, I have the freedom on the road. I drive alone in my car. Type of attitude, but it's really changing. And we invest in a company called Scoop, which really works with employers, big companies like Amazon and Microsoft to pull people around the workplace. So you have this trust issue kind of taken out into a car, because it really makes sense. You have a lot of toll roads, you have traffic lanes, you have HOV lanes. It really makes sense. And therefore the problem is big enough where people then adopt to a new mode. And this is what I saw working in the US well. You have in Europe, it's very different, of course. I think EV adoption, you see it right now. Every single government or the largest government think about in this crisis moment right now, how can they support new clean technologies, and at least between Germany and France, large economies, they will spend thousands of dollars per car as a subsidy to be adopted. So those things will also drive different adoptions and different use cases. So I think it depends region by region. And one more example I would give is a company called Via. Via in New York, who has been in New York, it's a company that is doing shared transportation. So essentially what Uber Pool or Lyft Line is doing, but purely as a service around vans. And they actually have seen immense success through COVID and through the last couple of years, because governments are desperately looking for new modes of transportation. Building a bus stop costs $500,000, and building the city around mass transport kind of routes is super complex, and it takes a lot of money. So companies like Via are helping with this transition as well, and especially right now around resilient workforce, and it's much more flexible and up to the time.
Alexis, then Paul.
Yeah, so I spent last year a year on advising investors to put some money into a very interesting company called Copter Group AG, which was an hybrid helicopter company bought by Leonardo, the Italian helicopter manufacturer. And I think the problem with transportation is back to the problem of regulators. You know, what the FAA, what the CA would do to change the sky so that we can do something different flying. And this investment was very interesting because we pitched to Sequoia Capital in the US. We spoke to few players with Uber Lyft. And it was very clear that the regulators, both in the US and Europe, don't want to change too much what's happening in the sky for different reasons. And even if you have an interesting model, this was a hybrid helicopter with one engine, a bit like a car who can have a turbine plus an electric engine. It was cutting edge, and you know, the next move to this industry and to the helicopter industry, which where I started my career as an aerospace engineer, is changing, but very slowly. I would agree with Bernard because of regulations.
Bernard, go ahead.
I like what you said, Alexis, because I don't see the relationship directly, but basically now France seems to be discovering that we should connect harbors to trains, and then trains to warehouses at last. So that's the first step before we have helicopters without pilots. At least we should get, let's say, trains to go into the heart of the cities with freight, not only passengers, but freight. That would save a lot of trucks on the highways, of course, but that's where we are. So it seems we're talking of the future, but at least something of the past has not yet happened, at least in countries like France. That's what I see.
Well, and I mean, let's remember. No, yeah, well, I'm with you. Let's remember, these are two very established industries, right? Mm-hmm. Transportation, I mean, I was reading yesterday about where the current state of autonomous vehicles are, and you know how long it's been since we've had many of the automotive companies that are still around. And I mean, this has been well over 100 years. These things are not easy moving industries. And then even with supply chains, I mean, think about how long we've had supply chains. I mean, forever, since we've wanted to move a product from point A to point B, there's been some type of supply chain. So to your point, while we are talking about the future, some of these things they just haven't changed. I mean, Christian brought up paper and pencil, right? People are still making phone calls to get things done when really we should be digitized. So I think there's the common thread here today is we're not just looking at the future. We need to catch up. We need to get back to just a normal and then look towards the future, because right now, so much of this is still done in decades behind that just hasn't changed. And Paul, I didn't mean to cut you off, but do you have anything to add on to that, what Bernard had said as well?
No, I just wanted to say, you know, the technology will arrive before the human element of acceptance in many of these cases. So driverless cars, I think within the next 6 years, we'll have that technology pretty refined, but getting humans to drive it, especially in America, to give up the car, the liability issues, the legal issues, that will have to catch up, but the technology will be there. Dubai is already testing aerial drone taxis. They're already testing it. And they can adopt it easier because they're in a more experimental place. Singapore is already testing the idea. But I think the problem we have is the drone deliveries and driverless taxis. The technology will be there, but we also have to look at security issues, right? Terrorism issues about flying all around in airspace. Singapore has a law that regulates where drones can fly and not fly and at what altitude. But based on that, they hope to open up the drone delivery services. In the United States, there's huge potential for it. So I think the technology is coming very, very fast. It's just a question of how do we as consumers accept using it and giving up, what we have as habits. But I think the technology will be there in the next 5-10 years. It will take longer for the legal elements and the humans to follow the trend. I did want to add one other comment, and that is we all keep talking about supply chain. And to me, there isn't a supply chain anymore. There's not a demand chain. There are dynamic value networks. So we're going to just have a complete mix of these networks, which technology enables, from regional hubbing to local distribution nodes to virtual manufacturing to 3D printing. And all these things will exist simultaneously. And technology enables us to use these different nodes and networks optimally to deliver to consumers. So I think in our industry, we need to start thinking more about dynamic value networks and how these different networks interact and evolve rather than the chains connecting, because I think technology has already blown that apart. We're way beyond that now.
I think you're spot on many points, and I'll just say from a security standpoint, and Bernard, I see you. From a security standpoint, I mean, you couldn't be more spot on. We had the use case here in the States where a few friends decided to go take a Jeep out on the road and see if they could hack it, and they did, and took over a vehicle while someone else was driving it. Now that's just a small, I would say, use case amongst many, because as we've talked about in previous editions of VCTV, when we get into things like edge and the future of connectivity that we're growing towards, right, as 5G and others come into place, we start bringing in more sensors. So the idea of Internet of Things, getting more connected, security becomes a very big issue. There's a lot more things being shared. There's a lot more things being taught or talking between each other. Security is going to be one of the biggest issues. Now, we may worry about that as investors. We may worry about that as founders building this. Hopefully, as consumers, this is something we won't have to worry about. But we're going to come back to that. Bernard, you had
just a quick example. After the X-35 Joint Strike Fighter, the next US fighter jet is going to be AI piloted jet fighter. So that gives you an idea of where this is going.
So let me get to Bernard's point. Let's come back around data and privacy. I'll get everyone kind of queued up on that. So Christian, get ready. Alexis, Bernard, you have a point I want to let you get to.
Something about one key player with a young company called Amazon. I hold a little of a grudge against them. As a consumer, I'm very happy with the service whenever I order anything. On the other side, when I see as a professional, what I see is that they have moved the perception from the consumer from, day +1 to age +2. Why not? Fine. Except that sometimes it pushes the system to its very limits, and I mean safety limits for the people. And probably more important, they have initiated or sold the idea that delivery service comes free. And that's a total nonsense. That's a lie. That's a misrepresentation and a misperception. And when we get to delivering all the services that we just discussed, basically what it means is that some people, instead of taking their car, they don't know the cost usually, taking the car to collect the food at their Walmart of the place. And when they want to have it delivered, it has a cost, it has a price tag they're going to have to pay no matter what. So I'm dealing with some biggest retailers, they see the trouble, they see the pinch, because when you offer the delivery on a €150 or dollar basket, and when the delivery costs an average of €20, that's the minimum you do in Paris, somebody has to pay for it. So, and we have to get to terms with that. And even if the technology and AI is going to help a bit, but it's not going to fill the gap between $0 and the $20. That's my fear. And that's why it will slow adoption.
Yeah. So how do we get over that? Because I mean, I think we all face that, right? You go to order food, you go to order a product, anything outside is Amazon, you look at it, even if it's $1 or €1 or any currency, you look at it and you're like,
dump your car.
No.
If you're in Paris, you dump your car, that's it. Take the cost of owning a car, and over time it will pay for the e-commerce.
Bernard, I'll push back on that. I don't think that's true. I think that's one piece of the puzzle, because you know, I mean, it's a, and I guess maybe the question better asked on my part is, you know, what will retailers look towards doing to adjust for this? Because Amazon, by the way, Amazon is not free. It is not free delivery. You still pay. You pay a yearly service, right? Prime. You pay almost $200 a year, I think it is close to now, to get said free service, unless you order a certain amount. And then, to your point, you're right. But will other retailers, big box, have membership services? And then how do the mom and pops, so the smaller businesses, how will they potentially adjust for this? Because it is consumer. I mean, you're right. Inherently, I look at a product and I see $1, like, no, I shouldn't have to pay for the shipping, even though it's every right that I should. But Amazon has taught me otherwise.
Well, the last months have been a good experience, and I and a couple of other people have found out that basically we can, sorry for that, we can order everything that comes in a box from the retailer, cereals, butter, no matter what. And as soon as you want to get to fruit and vegetable or meat, you go to a bio shop or you have it delivered. And because retailers are not good at good food and good fruit, for instance, they can't have good fruit. That's technically so difficult for them. So that's a split that now is really happening everywhere, at least around in France and around in Europe.
Paul or Alexis, did you guys say, I feel like both of you had some kind of comment there. I didn't want to.
Yeah, I think the real stress level that's developing is companies like Amazon are orchestrators of the network. They don't produce the products. They don't do the micro product delivery. They're using other companies, but they are the network orchestrator. You go to their site, they control it. They know the customer better than anyone. And so they're the power player for $1 trillion plus. And then they're squeezing the logistics executioners underneath. Same with Alibaba in Asia. Same with iTunes. Look at iTunes on a software basis and games. They take 30%. It's not their product, but they take 30% because they control the network. Now, I think in the case of Amazon and others, they're squeezing as previous speakers have mentioned. And the cost on trucking, on shipping, on forwarding, all of that is getting squeezed tighter and tighter. And what do you do? Because they have the volume. And then they're even entering some of the logistics space, right, with their own air fleet, and that puts even more pressure on. But at some point, you can't squeeze beyond that, and then it forces more consolidation of the traditional logistics players, right? But in the end, how will this play out is the real question, because in the end, you're going to have a cutoff point where you just have to acknowledge the real logistics costs can't be squeezed beyond a certain level. And we're compressing through these methods. But I think that's where the industry is suffering now, and it has to redefine itself. How, you still have costs when you deliver, and you're either going to charge the customer or you're going to build it in indirectly of the price of the product. but it has forced efficiency, but now it's forcing potential bankruptcies.
Right, Alexis.
Yeah, so what we see here in France and in the UK, we see in Russia, we see 2 or 3 players really reacting to Amazon, like Ocado, trying to deliver in London, very interesting through different brands of retailers, different products with the same quality of customer experience than Amazon, and with another logistic full of robots and lots of investment, but a very interesting business here in London. And the other one is obviously the investment made by the sports retailers, Decathlon. I'm an advisor of their company. They have decided to basically deliver in less than 24 hours anywhere in the world their products, like Amazon. You can buy a sportswear, a sport product, and you go to decathlon.com and you can have it delivered in Paris, in Beijing, in Moscow, in London, in less than 24 hours at your house. So there is, you know, some brand and some companies are really trying to figure it out how to compete with Amazon. And I think there will be some models coming up soon in Europe and in Asia for that.
I absolutely agree. And I want to get back to a point Paul made around data and privacy. So this is going to be a very big topic, privacy and security on one side, on how the role of privacy and security will play in the future of transportation and mobility, but then also data. How will data be used to empower the future of mobility and or supply chains? And Christian, I want to start with you. How are you seeing data along with data privacy play a role in the future of mobility?
Yeah, it's extremely important, as you already suggested. For that reason, we already made 2 investments exactly targeting the 2 most important aspects, in our view at least, for the automotive business. One is car ownership and how you can monetize data, for example. And the other one is cybersecurity. How do you secure access and all of this? So maybe not surprisingly for some of you, both companies are in Israel. And it's a hotspot for everything data, and cybersecurity obviously being one of their strongest skill sets from a talent pool perspective. So the company on the cybersecurity side is called Upstream, and they're cloud only. So they're securing anything where somebody, a hacker, might try to access a car through an app, a server, putting a cable into the car. So kind of all the external. So you don't have to install chips immediately in the car to be secured, because in fact, the car is all getting connected. There's much more data coming out of even outside of the car, important parts of the value chain. So this needs to be analyzed on the server side, on the data side, and that's why we invested there. And this is extremely important, not only because the obvious, like you want to protect your car, but also the governments are putting policies in place where they say you need to have a system in place where you can monitor, where you can lock down cars, where they cannot be used for terroristic attacks, where they can be taken over and driven into humans or whatever might be possible if you get access to the car. So extremely touchy topic, and there are lots of policies around that. And then the data element itself, like who owns the data, what can be done with the data. Of course, GDPR sets a lot of clear standards there, and the California GDPR in the US also puts equally or similar tough regulations in place, what you can do with personal data. So it's really about controlling your destiny, controlling the data, anonymizing, building a platform where it can be used, but you're still in charge and you still control what can be done with the data. So for that reason, we invested in a company called Autonomo, which is building this platform, or builds this platform for many OEMs in the world, and really has millions and millions of connected cars on the platform for that purpose. Because sometimes you just want to have anonymized data for insurance purposes or financial planning. You don't actually care about what's the human, like what my car is doing, but just what are all the cars aggregated do in New York. And this is what this company enables data buyers and data sellers.
Well, it's a huge enterprise use case. I think from a consumer standpoint, I want my car to speak to another car to potentially make money off of that, right? There is that use case we've talked about previously, but I think with what we've all said, the future of car ownership or mobility in general will be taken out of our hands in a good way. And so we may not want that data, right? It may come back to you being the owner and manufacturer. And like you said, that then gets rolled up or back to insurance or just used for general production purposes as well. Alexis.
Yeah, on data, we saw 2 years ago the acquisition of Qualtrics by SAP. So I would really say for $8 billion. So data is really the battle for customer experience, employee experience, and brand experience today. And one of the startups I invested in recently, CXB Hub, we're all about data of customers, data about employees, data about brands. And the future of behaviors of consumers is analyzing those data. So one of the strongest business model I've seen is the Qualtrics business model, analyzing that with dashboards for Fortune 500 companies, and they have 75% of the market of that business. So I would agree. On security, it's a very complex subject. I think lots of people are really worried on security right now. Cybersecurity, the last 4 months, with what happened, has increased. There are threats everywhere. London is worried about cybersecurity. And I think it's a very big agenda on lots of boards right now, whether, the security issue should be a board level subject.
You bring up data and consumer experiences. One thing we haven't touched on yet is the other applications that may be brought into mobility. So the idea of infotainment, and I'll bring this up in a minute unless everyone's got a topic to talk now, but I see you, Bernard, don't worry. I'm watching the finger come up every time. Don't worry, I see you, thank you. But infotainment, I mean, how are we bringing entertainment into the future of mobility, right? Where does fintech play a role? Where do all these other areas play a role when vehicles can drive themselves, or, we're just hopping in, hopping out? I think you're bringing up a very good point around data ownership and how that may fuel customer experiences. Are you seeing anything in this space right now, Alexis, with the companies that you just mentioned?
Yeah, the laws of GDPR are basically in Europe changing a bit the field. Europe is very worried about this subject because data are going in networks and in big GAFA's company that we don't own, at least Europe. So I think there is a reaction in Europe about this. In other areas like Russia and China, I think it's even bigger because they want to use those data. But I think there is a subject here, which is very, very big.
Bernard, you had a comment. You're on mute.
Quick one, on data. Well, my first company 15 years ago, you used to have the largest consumer database in Europe. And my quick take was that even if we had so much data about everything, it was hard to find the people able to make the right queries into this data. So that was and I would say, I don't know if it's good or bad, but the only people I found who could do that were a few guys at Procter & Gamble. Maybe they had some experience in research, and all the consulting young guys. For the rest, at the larger accounts, well, I remember talking to CEOs saying, well, I've subscribed to your service, but I don't get any intelligence out of it. I said, well, maybe it's not the data, it's your people. It's very undiplomatic, but that was the reality. Quick take. So second is on cybersecurity. I happen also to be investor, and I'll be very quick. The one matter in many countries is governments should give digital IDs to people. Full stop.
You've tuned in once or twice to VCTV. We've talked about the idea of global IDs or decentralized identities, so DIDs, and how these may play a role in our future. And I think Christian brings this up a little bit around some of the investments he made about car ownership and getting access to the vehicle as well. And having that global ID is huge. I can't remember which car company it was, So we'll have to fact check this afterwards. But I did see recently a commercial for a car company that now has an app that you can share ownership amongst people. So you can actually send an invitation to Paul to have access to my car. So I don't have to give him keys. It's all digital keys, which is exciting, but directly terrifying at the same time, back to the points of security, because someone who has a security background, as we all have talked about, we do, there's a lot of issues with that, but we'll come back. Paul, anything around data and security, as we've all just kind of teed you up for that.
To the other side of the world. So China is using AI with access to all the data in the country through its unique internet, closed internet. And every person in China is now given a social credit score by the government. And on the one hand, you can start shopping with facial ID in grocery stores in Shenzhen in certain places. But on the other hand, that social credit score can determine where you travel and many aspects of your life. So that's one extreme where data control can be quite frightening in terms of its capability. Then on the other hand, in our own industry, AI is driven by data. So Google, Facebook, the more data they have, the more they develop AI. But I think in our own industry, just going micro, the blockchain is developing two ways to enable more creative logistics and supply chain. And that is, you have the neutral data control model, where IBM is an example with 400 projects and 14 verticals. Use the one with Maersk. They're developing shipping networks where data can flow, but they will hold the data neutrally as, quote, IBM. And therefore it's protected. And then the benefits of the blockchain are shared across the industry as they refine that. And then the other model, of course, is the normal blockchain model with miners or other creative ways of developing, where smaller companies can leverage data creatively and securely through blockchain formulas. So I think we're in a really experimental space, from the China example, where everything is being consolidated and unified with very wide control, to small companies experimenting now with their own blockchain models, to the neutral data control model where IBM is holding data for banks, for shipping lines, etc., as the neutral arbiter. So I think this is a huge question in terms of how are we going to leverage the power of data efficiently while protecting the critical security elements and the different government regulations. So I think that's a whole hour-and-a-half discussion on its own, but very critical.
Let's touch on a piece of it. So government. I mean, government plays a big role in the two topics we're talking about today, and we've only touched on it. I mean, what do governments have to do? What role should they be playing in the future of transportation? Because, I mean, here in the Bay Area in San Francisco, we had scooters for about a day, and then they were gone. We had OFO bikes for about a day or a week, and then they were gone. And I'm being dramatic on the time frame for our audience, of course, but very short periods, and they disappeared. However, ride sharing came and is still here. But in other cities, that's been an issue. And you look at China, you look at Europe, you look at places around the world, government plays a very different role in all these. What should government's role be in helping to push forward regulations? Because if regulations don't go forward, everything we talk about doesn't exist. So Alexis, we'll start with you. Paul, we'll come back to you, and then we'll come around.
Well, I think governments need to play a very important role. We're coming from Europe, in London and France, and we've seen interesting stuff happening in France, which is a very governmental regulated market, like, companies like, BlaBlaCar, or, what's happening with, transportation and in the streets of Paris. So even, in a country where government has a very big position, there are rooms for, innovation. And in London, I think we see a lot of the regulators are being challenged to follow innovation. So all the entrepreneurs and investors are pushing the British government and, the fintech industry, the to move and change with technology. And it is happening in London. I think it is happening in Paris. In other areas like Moscow or Beijing, it's more complicated. But I think it's interesting what's happening in Europe, at least on the role of governments in this sphere.
See, I did it too, Paul. So our governments, are they actually getting involved though, or are they just saying they're getting involved? Because I mean, some governments will put out policies. It's great, cool, exciting, saw your piece of paper. But are governments actually finding a balance between here's what we say as a policy, here's how we're going to work with big, small, medium-sized companies, and here's how we're going to make this stuff work on the ground? And the reason I ask is here in California, we have many different levels of that happening. You look at Palo Alto, the city lights, so some of the intersections are actually sharing data with vehicles. And so vehicles can talk to that city grid. You look at the greater area of Los Angeles, same thing. So there's some use cases of this, but in Europe, are you seeing this where government is playing all pieces of that puzzle and trying their best to do it well? Alexis first, are you seeing some of that? And then Bernard, I see you.
Yes, we see government trying to give a bit of their power to new technology or new business model. You know, taking the example of helicopters, I've been lobbying the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK for more than 10 years to change what's happening with helicopters in London. And it's been very difficult because they don't want helicopters to fly here. So, you know, it's an example when, you know, a government wants to block something. There is one heliport in London and there are more than 25 in New York, 30 in Moscow now, and there is only one in London, simply because the government wanted to stop helicopters. So.
Absolutely. Bernard, Christian, Paul. So Bernard, go ahead.
Yeah, I need to say it's probably a good thing because we need the government. We hate them, but we need them in the sense that if you look at infrastructure that's going to be amortized over, let's say, 20 years or 30 years or more, I don't know any private investor who happily does that type of bet. So that's where governments come in. Just to give an example of Paris, we started as a company a discussion with the #1 retailer over here to improve their urban logistics. Initially, they asked that their usual trucks get into Paris. And we told them, hey guys, didn't you realize that the municipality of Paris wants clean transportation? So since you're gonna fight for locations in Paris, small warehouses in Paris, do you believe seriously that they're gonna authorize your transportation system if it keeps polluting the city and it goes against their policy? And they started to listen. Now they're up to the point, say, well, we definitely need to have a look at the solution. So government has a role in either promoting or blocking. Of course, the right balance is always depends on which side of the table you are, but they have a definitive role. And also, by the way, most of at least in France, they own the land. They are the biggest land owners. We need to remember that. And
in some cases, the sky, to Alexis's point as well. That's another little unknown fact, depending on which country you may be in. So Christian, to you, I know you have a point as well. And then Paul, I'm coming to you on this one. So Christian.
Yeah, I think being European, you probably have a bit of a different relationship to government than the typical American relationship to government. I mean, that's at least a general statement I would make there, but maybe high level, just looking at innovation culture, because the others already captured points I also wanted to make. If you just look at participation in companies and startups, France, Germany, UK, it's not really mature enough to have at the level of the US, where participation in a startup will definitely get you to a level where you have financially a huge success if you're not a founder. I mean, the founders is pretty similar, but then the top 50 employees, the kind of stories you hear about the first 50 employees of Uber, you don't hear that so much in Europe because the laws are actually not there. The maturity around enabling participation in companies are not there. So government actually plays a big role. To Bernard's point, this is something where they should just give more freedom and not block, but they are blocking here for protection for historical reasons.
Oh, Christian, I think
the innovation culture in Europe. So that's something that needs to be changed.
Thank you, Christian. We were breaking up, so it sounds like that's just what Christian was finishing off with. That's just the innovation culture in Europe and something that needs to change. And his reference to that is letting government be a little bit more open to smaller startups, helping encourage them to innovate and drive what they may be building in these sectors as well. And no stress, Christian. I hope I got your point right. If not, just send me a message in the chat and I'll reiterate it for you. Paul, to you, same question.
You know, the architecture of infrastructure has to have a major government role, but it has to be a government role in partnership with business and planning and strategy. The physical infrastructure can't just evolve by entrepreneurial companies. The government has to build networks to support that ecosystem. Now, I'm from actually where you are sitting now, the Bay Area and Las Vegas, and then 20 years wandering across Asia with complete models of efficiency and extreme chaos. But I'll just use close to home the Singapore model. So there's a new port being developed. It'll be the second largest port in the world. It'll be fully automated and it opens in 8 years from now. That's a government initiative. But the government has already brought in consultants and said, what should our infrastructure look like connected to that port for the following 10 years after that 8-year opening? And they've actually formed working committees with business leaders from the private sector and the universities and the government agencies, and they're meeting quarterly. I've been on a few of those, you know, as a foreigner, it's quite a privilege, but they're actually saying, here's our plan. What do you think? What should we do? And so I have to admit, I like the idea because you have to have government driving certain infrastructure to build the environment that allows business to really evolve. And at the same time, business has to play the role with government in letting them know what they need, what they expect. And so, you know, when I look at Silicon Valley as the tech center of the world by far, but the BART system is going to take 10 or 15 years to get a train out there, and the highway looks the same as it did 15 years ago, I don't get it. I really don't understand. And so government has to play a role, but it should do it in partnership with business. And we have to plan what infrastructure will look like 10, 15 years ahead. We can't just do it all randomly because the stakes are too high. And if other countries do it better, then they have an advantage. So I think this is a big issue that needs to be redefined and discussed at a much higher level, frankly.
Yeah, well, look at Asia, and I've mentioned this on previous episodes as well. I mean, the city of Shenzhen had a 2-year initiative. It's such a great example. It's why I continue to bring it up. An initiative to bring all of their city buses from gas powered to electric in 2 years. They turned 17,000, just under 17,000 buses over to electric in just around a year. Just around a year. They were planning to do that in 2 years. We have nowhere near that in any city in the United States. And then you look to Europe, to Alexa, I see you unmuting. You look to Europe, there are huge economic zones or new cities that have been created. I think one's Media City. I may be incorrect on that name, but that city did something very similar to Singapore, opened themselves up, laid in infrastructure, did their best, not saying it's perfect, did their best to lay in infrastructure and say, okay, here's what we think we need to have, what else do we need to have, and how can we build this together? And here's the roadmap, go do you. And it's just fascinating to see this on a global scale. We talked as well about what's happening in Africa, and there's several initiatives like this in Africa. Latin America is seeing this in Mexico, Singapore, in South America, we're seeing this in Australia, we're seeing this. This is happening everywhere. It's just a process, unfortunately, and some governments are taking faster shape or quicker lessons than others. And Alexis, you had a point.
Yeah, the good example here also is high-speed train, in France, and the difficulty to have a high-speed train in the UK, which is not happening despite the last, 10 years of voting for it. So, when governments are behind the high-speed train program, like in France with the TGV, or with the Eurostar between London and Paris and Amsterdam now, it's happening. And there is a tunnel, the Eurotunnel, which took 25 years to build. But then it's happening. And then the money invested in all this give a green infrastructure in a way. Because it's not, we know that high-speed train are much greener than airplanes. And it's somebody who has spent 10 years at Airbus saying that. So,
I mean, bless Elon Musk's heart for creating a boring company and Hyperloop. I mean, here in California, we're supposed to have a high-speed train that goes from San Francisco to LA. Still doesn't exist. A high-speed train from Los Angeles to Las Vegas still doesn't exist. These are projects that have been talked about for 10, 20, 30 plus years. It just haven't happened. But in other countries, I mean, they happen much quicker, and you're seeing those different mentalities to Christian's previous point around mobility and how things look and feel for users. Paul, you have a point.
The first boring project that will actually operate is in Las Vegas in 1 year, connecting the convention center networks. So that'll be the first boring company project. Good news for Vegas. Yeah. And another quick example was Tony Hsieh from Zappos went to Vegas and he said, I'll leave Silicon Valley if you give me headquarters in Fremont Street. And he said, but I want the City Hall building for my headquarters. And then I'll build a startup ecosystem. And they actually gave it to him. They gave him the City Hall building, had to move to a new one. And he built a 4 or 5 city block startup ecosystem in Las Vegas. So I love the fact that you can break the rules and have a blend of entrepreneurs and government. And I think that's pretty great that the mayor of Vegas gave up the whole City Hall building and gave it to to a tech company in Silicon Valley and took the gamble, and it worked.
Well, and there's many cities as well that are putting in entrepreneur programs or entrepreneurial residence programs. More governments are trying to bring entrepreneurs and investors and the likes to help spark some of this, which leads me to a very, very big question is, as investors, where are the areas of opportunity when it comes to mobility, transportation, and supply chain? Because it's very vast. I mean, we've talked about security, we've talked a little bit about infotainment, but as investors, for the 4 of you, where are you looking, or where should other investors in our audience be paying attention to as areas of opportunity in these spaces? Paul, I'm going to come to you first.
Well, I think the no-brainer is efficiency in transport and efficiency in order processing and warehousing, and there are thousands of startups playing in that area. So it's a question of who's really unique and how do they scale, because many will die in the process. What I like, and I'm involved mentoring a few companies in this space while I'm learning at the same time, obviously, is using new AI to help go into a company and bring efficiency to the procurement, planning, and logistics execution process. So how do you go into a company and say, my technology can bring solutions in how you plan your whole process of ordering, the whole infrastructure of the delivery. We're going to be an additional brain that will attach to your company and help you. And part of our money will come from the efficiencies we derive. So I think there's the lower end, which is trucking, shipping, warehousing, but there are so many thousands in that space. It's hard to see who's real and who isn't, especially with tighter money. But I really like the breakouts with AI playing niche focus opportunities, because they can really bring savings to major companies, and there is scalability in that. And down the road, I think several of them will then merge and integrate with the right investors.
Christian.
Yeah, I hope my internet connection is okay now. So I think in logistics, I would focus on visibility really just the simple replacing paper and pen with digital tools. And I think we can really start in introducing easy transparency tracking type of solutions that are not around in many areas, at least in automotive. On the mobility side, I think the interaction between services and government, what we talked about, like data generally, how is data used in public versus private space, brings big opportunities. We invested, for example, in a company that is just digitalizing kind of a digital twin from a curb space, so the pedestrian walkways in cities. So you need all of this in order for you to actually manage then the mobility service companies like scooter companies. Where can they park? Where can they not park? What is okay? How should it be taxed if you don't have buses anymore? How do you make taxation work? I mean, really this intersection of data that will govern that industry is an interesting opportunity in our view.
That's a great question. Something we haven't talked about around taxation and how does this monetize back to the city, right? We talked about monetizing for us as consumers, but not to the cities yet. So that's a pardon me, it's a really great point, Alexis.
Yeah. So the two areas I'm looking at the moment is blockchain, logistics, linked with logistics and transportation, and the other one is hotel tech. So the future of retail, linked with artificial intelligence, linked with new ways of basically buying and purchasing stuff. So those are the areas I'm looking at as an investor.
I'm on mute. Bernard, to you.
Okay. Well, I see it going the Paul's way, if I can say it from what Paul said. And I'm leaning that on a daily basis. Since we are in urban logistics, we are very physical in the beginning. We've moved a lot more digital right now. And I give you just one example. We just designed a dedicated ERP system, which addresses, for instance, retail tech in some ways as well. And on a recent tender, we had to deal with one of the major freight forwarders in the world, by the way. And this guy, they only took pallets. It just happens that we're dealing with a B2C company, and they don't deal with pallets; they deal with boxes. We told them, "Hey guys, how are you going to handle the whole thing? Do you have a tool to do that?" And they said, "No, we don't." And we said, "Do you mind using our system?" They said, "No." And it took 10 seconds to get, "No, it's okay with us." So basically, that means that with a proper scalable SaaS, of course, ERP system, we can have one of the largest freight forwarders as our subcontractor. It's just amazing. And for me, it's worrying for them over time. But that's the way it goes. And also we could, of course, franchise. So that goes to the notion of dynamic value networks. With this type of software, that can happen really overnight. And that's what we're not the only ones doing that, I guess, but that's going on right now over here.
Yeah, full credit to Paul on that. That's a great term. And I think a very big subject, Paul, we should unpack a little further on that's probably another hour and a half episodes that we should talk about that. Paul, yes, Bernard.
Yeah, the ultimate concept, I guess, is the physical internet.
Very, very interesting. And I like that. I got two more questions as we come to our lightning round, as we come to wrap here on the show today. So first and foremost, to the founders. This is for founders that are looking to raise capital in these areas. For the next 6 to 12 months, what advice do you have? Mobility is a long game. I think Christian can speak to that. It's a very expensive game. Same with Alexis. Logistics and supply chain, both Paul and Bernard, you've kind of brought this up. It's a fast moving, fast changing, fast paced situation. But looking from a founder's perspective, what should they have ready? What advice do you have for them raising capital in the next 6 to 12 months? So Paul, let's start with you.
Well, first, the financial data speaks for itself. You have to tell the story, and the story has to include case studies where you actually have broken through with several key customers who validate there is a value on your product, and it's scalable. So, great slides, but you have to tell a story that's validated with tangible case studies. The second one I always tell them is you need to plan what you look like 3 to 5 years ahead in terms of how much capital do you need to raise in stages and how do you control dilution. Because if you don't manage it well and you take too much money too early before you've done the right things, then you've diluted the company too quickly and you won't be motivated to build the company forward and it won't succeed. So the story, the case studies, and then prove that there's scalability. And then you have to plan what your board will look like in advance so you don't lose control of your own company after ABC rounds. You have to have a strategy of board structure, and you have to, you have to have stages in how you develop the company with investment and cost control. That's my summary.
Planning for growth. In summary, to our
Make
audience.
it real instead of short-term story.
Right. We know that your 5-year projections, 1 is hopefully on point, 2 probably not, 3, 4, and 5 realistically not going to happen. But knowing how you think about this, showing how you think you'll grow based on, to Paul's point, validation, based on the use cases that you've gone through is very, very important. Great point, Paul. Alexis.
So my take would be the EF model, entrepreneur first, here in London and Paris. So really link your company or your fundraise with the deep tech idea. So one of the co-founders need to be really tech and to understand tech deeply to basically raise money right now and raise big money. Models which are a bit too simple, I think, don't work anymore. So I will focus on deep tech investment, like blockchain, like artificial intelligence, like cybersecurity. Those are very hot subjects here in London and Paris.
Speaking Paul in my language, I love it. Bernard, to you, what advice do you have?
It's always difficult with that. Well, first, I take 100% of what Paul and Alex said. That's easy to say. The next thing I would say, remembering, is find the right wave and surf the wave. I mean, the investors are a bit gregarious, so you need to find a topic that appeals to them. Don't fight them, appeal to them and ride the wave. And if you find a parade, as you say, step in front of the parade and just say you're going to lead the whole game. That's something that matters in the end as well. But you need to do your homework first and with the use cases and such.
I love it. Christian, what other advice do you have for founders?
Yeah, so in addition to what was said, obviously the last 6-12 months changed the world in a very dramatic way. So I think you shouldn't just come with the same pitch you would have given 6 months ago. You should show how your company, your vision can evolve and actually be much stronger now. And this is really what I see. Most startups are doing things differently and new and innovative. So this is now what is needed, and needed even more than before. And for sure. So like try to understand what investors are looking for, right? The waves, the party as Bernard was describing, and giving the context and why things are accelerating now. Because many industries have been very slow, and investors need to hear why is it time now? What is the timing forcing factor here for your business to really accelerate?
Absolutely. All great advice. And one thing I will add from our previous episode on Friday at VCTV is feel free to ask questions. So do your homework, as Bernard said, not just on your company and your industry, but also do your homework on the investors that you're talking to. Make sure the investors that you're pitching, you're reaching out to, are investors that are investing in your industry. They also have capital to deploy. And feel free to ask questions to the investors you're talking to about their investment process, about how they make investment decisions, where and when they are making investments. This is a two-way street. So to founders, do your homework, not just on your company, but also on your investors, and make sure to ask questions. It's a two-way street. Guys, last question before closing thoughts. I thought this would be kind of a fun one because Alexis and Christian were going back and forth on this. So Prediction. What year do you think we'll have autonomous, AI, no human, flying cars and or helicopters, but flying cars sounds more fun. So when is the Jetsons flying car situation finally going to happen? Your year prediction, just for fun. You won't be held to it. Alexis, you're last because you brought this up. Bernard, what's your fun year prediction?
Well, trials, today, mass deployment no earlier than 2030.
All right. Christian.
Yeah, in a full serviceable way where your mother can actually take it and not just early adopter innovators. Yeah, 2030, 35. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Paul.
Sorry to be boring, but the same time frame, depending on the country and the geography, 2030, 2035 will be the scale out.
All right. Alexis, take us home. Are the guys right? What do you know that we don't? What's your prediction?
Well, we will see a few things in 2025. In 5 years, you will in few cities, few interesting things. You mentioned Dubai, you mentioned areas where regulators are a bit softer, and there will be there lots of interesting things happening.
I love it. I'm going to go with the boring as well, 2030, 2035. But I'm betting hard on Alexis here. So 2025, I'm hoping for it. We'll be back on a VC TV episode talking about how he was right or wrong. But with that being said, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining. As we do here on every episode of VC TV, I'd love to get your closing thoughts on anything else that you think going forward, how this industry will look, and then where can everyone find you online? Bernard, let's start with you.
Find me online. Well, LinkedIn, easy. That's the best way to find me. Instagram a bit as well, but that's more for leisure.
Wonderful. Paul, any closing thoughts, and then where can everyone find you online?
Well, I think, you can't fear disruption. You have to embrace it. And that's where the greatest opportunities exist. So anyone who's on this show as an entrepreneur, this is a good place to be. Thrive on disruption, because that's where the best ideas come out and the best opportunities if you really believe in them and you have the passion. So that's my comment. You can reach me on LinkedIn, Paul Bradley, and my website, capricainternational.com.
Wonderful. Alexis.
Yeah, so my closing thought, transportation and logistics are fascinating industries, and we need new brains and new ideas. So please have a go at these industries. And you can find me on Alexis Grabar in LinkedIn or on Twitter.
Wonderful. And Christian, where can everyone find you, and any closing thoughts?
Yeah, as Alexis said, those are industries where it's really about real goods, real people, real things. It's not just in the cloud. So extremely exciting, life-changing. So if you want to develop software that changes the world, I think those are two great industries. You can find me on, for the Asians looking at this episode, on Christian Noski in WeChat, or just my email address, christian.noski@alliance-rnm.com.
Wonderful. First WeChat drop we've had on the show. Thank you for that. Guys, again, thank you so very much. Really appreciate you taking the time. And Paul, you staying up so late as well. Do appreciate it. To you, our live audience, thank you for tuning in today. And thank you as well for all the great questions and comments that came through. If you like today's episode, please do click the subscribe button. Give the video a thumbs up. You can find all of us available on social media 24/7, as mentioned today. Thank you, Alexis. And guys, I'm going to send you off. A big thank you, by the way, to Elena and to the entire LA Token team for bringing this episode of VCTV to you. Paul, Alexis, Bernard, Christian, again, thank you. You guys can go ahead and drop off. We are going to be back here in 60 seconds with an awesome keynote by one of our previous guests who joined us last week as well. So, gentlemen, thank you very much, guys. I'm Kyle Ellicott, your host for VCTV. We'll be back here in about 60 seconds. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. I'm Kyle Ellicott, your host for VCTV. Just had a wonderful, outstanding conversation about the future of supply chain and logistics from investors around the world. We talked about what's happening in Europe, what's happening in Asia, what's happening in the United States, and everywhere else, and how transportation, supply chain, and logistics are dramatically shifting, and where the investment opportunities are for investors, and what advice founders need to hear to be successful in these areas where there is opportunity of plenty. But we are now going to switch gears to welcome back a very dear growing friend of mine, who I've had the pleasure of having on many episodes of VCTV. I'm excited to welcome back Mohammed, all the way from the other side of the world from me today. And Mohammed is here to talk to us a little bit about his journey, which I think is incredibly important, and how he went from a receptionist to a general manager. So career ventures and rewards. And this is important for so many people to hear, as he'll reiterate that it doesn't matter who you are or where you are in your career, there's always opportunity to grow, and there's always opportunity to do more if and where you want it. You just have to go and chase it and take advantage of it. So with that being said, I'm Kyle Ellicott. A big thank you to Elena and to the entire LA Token team for bringing VCTV to you, our live audience. As Mohammed's talking, if you have any comments, questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll do my best to ask them either during or after his discussion. And if you like today's episode, click the subscribe button or give us a thumbs up, and we'd love to hear more from you as well. Mohammed, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the exciting intro, man.
It's a pleasure. I haven't seen you in I think 50 hours. This is amazing.
Yeah, man, it's technology. We are transferring. Hopefully, within 10, 15 years, we'll be, flying within seconds. So we are into that.
I can't wait. I mean, yeah, like we just talked about, we're going to have potentially flying autonomous, pilotless vehicles in the next 10 to 15 years. So we're going to see each other in 5 minutes. Be quicker than Zoom. It'll be great.
It'll be great. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know you got do you have a PowerPoint you want to show as well?
I do. Yes.
Okay. So you can go ahead and get that set up, and I'm going to turn the camera over to you to let you kind of go and take the reins.
All right. Awesome. So let me do the screen sharing. Okay.
There you go.
We have it on.
Perfect.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for the LA Token team and Elena, and thank you, Kyle, for the intro. It was a warm intro. As you said, yes, it was crazy going from receptionist to a GM right now. In retrospect, looking back, but it was really fun and also full of adventures, I would say. So let me turn to the content. We will be going to the journey. Where did I start from, and the private ventures that I did. Some I failed, and some I succeeded in bringing some money. Decision making that I've dealt through my career, and also some professional, I would say, wars and victories, and building the next move while you are working at your current role. So first of all, what are the decisions that I've gone through? Shall I be enrolled in a large or small company? This is one of the first questions that I've dealt with. Shall I apply online or offline? What is the salary? And shall I pay for the company, or shall I help the company, or whatnot? So all of that, and also the balance of technical and business knowledge and experience. We'll tackle all of that, but before that, let's go into some notes here. Generalizations are not based primarily on the companies that I've worked with, because I've worked with companies, yes, and I've experienced, in a way, some internal policies of other companies as well because of the interconnected ecosystem. And also the information are based entirely on personal experience, except otherwise stated. And the advices shall not be taken literally, but may be taken as a hint for your working environment. And lastly, more can be said of each story, but time dictates to be concise. First, let's go through the journey. This map I've done for first the package growth since 2011, and this includes the part-time as well as the full-time. And you can see that there are some fluctuations in the package growth, which I dealt with throughout my career, which I think sometimes brought me to learn more about how I can manage my finances, as well as learning what can I use by having a large package with respect to smaller package, which may in fact be better to have a lower package than a large one, because it might incentivize you to move forward rather than just realizing that you have enough in the bank and you don't need to do anything whatsoever. So this is not quite, the numbers are not accurate, but the ratios are correct here. So then here the cumulative for each employer, and some employers I spent with them a year, some I spent with them a few months, and between part-time and full-time, and I will explain why, because ultimately I would suggest that everybody should go for having their career developed rather than just the company. And I've seen some people thinking that they should do anything and everything to please the company, but not themselves. So I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration. There should be some kind of balance. As you can see, I moved through around 11 companies between part-time and full-time, mostly part-time, of course, because I worked during the studies, because I thought I need to have some kind of support for my studies, for my expenses, for everything I do, as well as opening my business, which I think led me to realize that not everything that I can do or I can think of as generating money would lead, in fact, in the market to generate money. And you can see from the next slide, some losses I've dealt with. I've started in the 2000 with the chewing gums, and of course wasn't continuous from 2000 to 2012, but I had this love for ventures and for entrepreneurship. So I started with chewing gum. It sounds funny, but at least it was it was earning some money. The business was good in a way. In 2012, I started with car business. I've sold and bought a few cars. Didn't work out very well, because I had at the time a partner, and we couldn't manage the finances well. I didn't use, and it was a mistake. It was a mistake, honestly. I did not use, oh yeah, we know each other, we are friends, let's transact some money. So It wasn't good. I lost 8,000, maybe more, and even my money, I didn't get it until around 2014, 2015, which was a real problem at the time because he was in another country. So we worked on bringing cars from a country to another and so on and so forth. So that was a hassle. In 2013, I tried the junk, and I went all the way to the junk and those things to just try and get the money I needed to start a large venture. And before that, I worked in the King Fahd University in the Eastern Province, which is in Saudi Arabia, which is my university. I worked there as in part-time as a receptionist and also as housekeeping. So I tried all the ways to make the money. I couldn't honestly, and that led me to try different ventures, from the junk, the cars, the perfume, and in around 2016, I started a social entrepreneurship venture called Science Center, which is based on spreading the word about scientists and innovators and their innovations. So I spent on that around 50,000 or a little bit more between 2016 and 2018. That wasn't generating for me any money, but I thought it was good to do. And I shut down the business afterwards because I needed to focus more on something that generates money rather than just consuming money without generation. And 2018, and the way of going from the Science Center venture to 5 Senses is because I thought I needed the marketing department, marketing agency that I needed for the Science Center. And of course, that was also aligned with other projects that I've done, like in 2018, I was in 2017, 2018, I was working with Montaza Industries, as well as Basita, which is an app. It's a startup at that time. So I had I had developed more the entrepreneurship skills that I needed to start my own venture, and I started it in 2018 with a couple of influencers. That generated for me a
All right, apologies everybody. We're just having some technical difficulties here. We should be back with Mohammed in just a minute or so. Apologies and appreciate you bearing with us. Looks like we may have lost him for just a second as he restarts. This is an exciting topic for those who are tuning in. Every entrepreneur goes through quite a journey, to say the least, to get to where they are, right? There is no true overnight success. And when we hear the idea of overnight success, it's usually painted as such. But really, when you start to unpack how entrepreneurs or how founders or how executives or even investors, for our previous show, got to where they got, it becomes so obvious how they got there, listening to their story and seeing all of the failures along with some of the successes that led them to where they are. If you have the chance to read autobiographies of some of the greats, you'll know that it did not just happen overnight, right? Someone like Elon Musk, the trials and the trials he's still going through to become a successful entrepreneur is quite vast. Seeing how he grew up in one country, migrated to another, came to another, built 3 companies, 4 companies, and depending on how you're counting, and how they've all been on the verge of death, but also how he's been able to keep those alive. You look at the story of Apple, for instance, and Steve Jobs. You look at Bill Gates. I mean, Steve Jobs, for instance, started this company. It was not his first. He was also fired from the company, started a second, got that acquired, rejoined Apple, and then even then still had trials as well. Even for myself, my entrepreneurial journey and how I got here to where I am today is not very begin and end. Instead, as Mohammed's resetting up, there were a lot of lessons learned, a lot of failures. Starting my first business, learning how to do business digitally, learning what it meant to work with founders and co-founders, the lessons that Mohammed is mentioning, building operations and scaling, learning to take investment, learning what happens when a business fails, whether your own or others. The point is that everyone's journey is very different. There is no overnight success, and it's good to know that you're on your journey. It's yours and yours alone. So if you're looking to build the next biggest and largest company in the transportation industry, path is yours. There's plenty to look towards, but also know their success is not necessarily your success, but there's lessons to be learned in their journey as well. Mohammed, welcome back. Let's go ahead and turn the PowerPoint back on, and I'll stop sharing my story and let you share yours.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kyle. Yes, so the business in the was lucrative, yes, but it wasn't that easy, given the fact that you are dealing with different influencers and influencers of different ages and different backgrounds. So there is a lot of social skills that you need to have just to manage those people. So it was honestly very hard. So let's start with and ask ourselves, from the beginning, what shall I be enrolled in, a large or small company? And from my experience working with and seeing different companies around me, I gathered the information into 2 categories, and large and small. Large companies usually are more structured. That is not to say that small companies are not structured, but it is a tendency that most larger companies, Fortune 500s and so on, like around companies who have around 1,000 employees and more, probably 500 and more, they have a structured environment when it comes to policies and so on. Small companies, on the other hand, are more flexible, which means that you can thrive in those companies, in those environments, and your voice will be heard in those environments when you compare it with larger companies. And the career development when it comes to larger companies are in a way more clearer than the smaller companies and the startups, and that's because of the main source of or the main fact that that the risk startups usually face are very large, and hence you can't, as
I think we may have lost Mohammed again. We'll give him just a moment. Again, appreciate you guys in the audience staying with us. If you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in and I'll do my best. As Mohammed is leaving off on this topic here, and we'll have him back here in just a moment. So, the journey, as I mentioned, it is very different for every person, and you should really own yours. We get distracted very quick and easy of, should I go this path? Should I go that path? Is this traditional? Is that not traditional? It's yours at the end of the day. If you want to be an entrepreneur, guess what? You're going to learn a lot. Roller coasters up and down, they're going to happen. We talk about this on VC TV almost daily at this point of what's happening and what's changing in different industries. But under the surface, as entrepreneurs, we're living and breathing and learning those lessons. And to Mohammed's point, should you join as a company or should you start a startup? Do what may be best for you. Joining a big, large company or just a medium-sized company can actually be very, very beneficial. It can give you a great opportunity to learn, develop new skills. In some cases, they'll provide financial benefit if you want to go to additional schooling as well. But for me, I actually did this. So I had started a few companies in my entrepreneurial journey, and some worked, some didn't. And I had the opportunity to join a major company. And I took that on and joined that major company to learn more about the bigger world and possibilities of data and how we can leverage algorithms to build new applications or new products for future applications and for future industries. And so it was a great learning experience for me and something that was great for my journey, but might not be for everyone. I also, leaving university, joined right into the world of entrepreneurship, as Mohammed is talking, and said, hey, let's learn some lessons. And guess what? It was expensive and it was painful. It was very painful, but to Mohammed's point, as he's talking, a lot was learned, and I'll share my story another day. Back to you, Mohammed.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Apologies for the internet connection. It seems that I'm in Jeddah right now in a business trip, and it seems that the internet connection here is not that good. So anyways, let's go back. So the differences between larger and small can be listed in dozens and dozens of points. But here we go to the last point, to here 7, which is career development is largely based on industry, national, international changes, whereas in smaller companies, startups, and so on, SMEs in general, career development is largely based on team members and market behavior. And here is a distinction between industry and market that I've got from differences.guru, which is industry is producer-led, whereas market is consumer-led. You can think about it as, in the industrial cities and the malls, right? And the very important distinction is the package, of course. There is, high package expected, at least higher package with the larger companies, whereas, lower packages with smaller companies. But hey, shall you apply online or offline? For myself, I applied for around 1,000 jobs online. That probably turned me off for. I had a couple of meetings, a couple of interviews, to be honest, and I applied, which might be considered wrong, to different posts, different job positions, and different countries as well. Whether I have the at least the visa or not. So that wasn't the best strategy. And I also applied offline for around 100 or 200 companies, and I've got a job, to be honest. Firstly, from an offline, applying offline, but that's not the rule, right? So applying online, you have different international, maybe international competitions, and of course you have it depends largely on the CV rather than you going there and talking to the people and getting to know who what is going on inside the company, who's making the decisions. And because let's be honest, companies usually, especially small companies, do not usually take the decisions based on a very structured way, as we talked about before. So you need to understand how the decision is taken. So one of the companies that I've worked with, and it is funny that I've got the job because the general manager at the time, without mentioning the names, the general manager at the time was fighting with one of his subordinates, and he wanted me because I had the similar experience. So I got the job, and it was very crazy, and it was the last company that I visited, but I got the job, and it turned out to be a funny story. Also, one important distinction is the online is unbound by search, and by what I mean by search here is you going around, right? So if you are searching for a job in your surrounding, it will be very exhausting to go from one company to another, right? Because some will tell you, hey, go away. Someone will talk to you in a negative way, and so on and so forth. So it is always very difficult to go around and visiting companies, whereas it is very easy to do it online. But I haven't seen a lot recruiting from online or via online, to be honest. But definitely and certainly there are a lot in different experiences, not mine. All right, so how can I get the interviewer excited in me? Definitely show energy and excitement. That's the first thing you had to do, right? So you don't want to go boring, not even smiling, and not showing that you have some energy that is typical of the youth, at least. If you are not showing that, it might give the interviewer some question marks. And why I'm saying this, because I've done it myself, right? I hired people, I recruited different groups of people as well, and I recommended some CVs. And man, it's better to show that you are wholeheartedly into the company, because guess what? HRs are usually, and managers are usually fully dedicated for this company. So they want to see something matching their level, right? And of course, try to lead the conversation. Try to talk with the interviewer or interviewers about yourself, about the things, the projects that you've done. They want to see that you are proud of what you have done, even if it is small, even if it is, you don't consider it as an achievement. Those people, because they are usually older than you, they might see something very unique about what you say, that you think, it doesn't matter that you say that. No, say it, and say it with confidence. I once I interviewed one person, and this person was trying to interrupt and trying to show some of I wouldn't categorize it as positive attitude, especially in an interview, and that, to be honest, didn't go well for me, at least. So it was a rejection. The result was a rejection, and we didn't hire that person. But the other person who showed excitement, who showed that, hey, you are interviewing a person, a human being, not a machine. We don't want machines, especially in the HR related, social related jobs. You don't want to recruit machines. You want human beings. You want someone who can carry on a conversation. And guess what? An interview is a kind of technical data-based conversation, nothing more. So try to get the anxiety and the fear of interview away. So the body language, and this is the next thing that we should be thinking about. The body language talks a lot about the interviewer. Is he or she excited in you? Are they going to recruit you? You can think about it in a kind of you are meeting someone, your friend maybe, your brother or so on. You know that this person is upset, or this person is happy, by, of course, the hand gestures, the face turning around, for example, the tone of voice, the change of position, the eyes looking up or down, or looking at the mobile phone. Some interviewers will be doing that just to make you, not relaxed. So that's their way of testing. But I believe that as an interviewer, I should be making the person more comfortable, because hey, we can get anyone not at ease at many different things. So that's easy to do, but it's not easy to make the other person comfortable. And that's I believe, from my experience, give me the most out of people, rather than showing that you are confrontational and you are trying to pinpoint the bad attitudes or things like that. That didn't work, and that shouldn't be used as well. What about the salary? Shall I get a larger salary? If we go back, right? I've here, especially in the growth, at times I decided to get a lower salary than my previous salary, and that turned out to be a very good decision, the best decision that I've done at the time. And why? Because that motivated me to do something really great in the company itself. And within the couple of ventures and the companies that I've enrolled in, I discovered that there is a kind of formula that we can use to determine this, what should be your salary. But before that, you can decide which salary you should have based, of course, on your career level, your position, the job title that you have, the company job ladder. Is it faster? You go up faster or slower? You think about that. You think about, of course, your expenses. This is the first thing. But you might also do this strategy of getting something low to compensate for the experience that this company is providing for you. So that we should have it in mind. And the equation is that I'm sharing it with you. Your new package, from my perspective, should be 30% of actual expenses. Your actual expenses right now should be at least 30% of the offer that you get from the company. The expected expenses, you want to travel, you want to get a new car, new mobile phone, new home, a new apartment, whatever you have, you are planning to have at least with this new package. You can equate it to 30%, 20% for savings, and another 20% for investment. Early on, try to think about investment, and this might be very reasonable. At least for me, it worked very well. This technique, and it gives you something to rely on and to base your judgment. Is this offer really good for you or not? Right? The percentages can be changed, of course, depends on your mood of going into spending your package. So how can you be a market leader in a new industry or in your existing industry? And some people go from being graduated to being lost in which area shall they start, right? So it's not like a doctor. If you are an engineer, it's not like a doctor. You have your certificate and you go to the hospital. Yes, which hospital? That's correct. But when it comes to engineers, it's very difficult, man. From companies to companies, they might not rely on engineers as much, or at least equally as much. So how can you be a market leader, at least in a new industry? Well, first of all, you have to have a good network in this industry. So you get to know the people in this industry. You try to associate with them and try to ask them a lot of questions. All the questions that you have in mind, write them down. If you couldn't find them on Google,
Oh, we may have lost Mohammed one more time, but again, thank you to the audience for staying tuned. We'll have Mohammed back here in just a moment. And to a lot of the points he's making, this goes not just for your own journey as your career, but also to you as founders and the things you want to be thinking about when you're pitching to investors, right? So how, as he was talking about how to be a market leader in a new industry, right? Network. Get out there, go to events physically or virtually, connect with people online, and get out there and read everything you possibly can. Consume podcasts, consume VCTV, shameless plug, consume, and then start leading by example. Get out there, start talking, start showing your ability to advance in the industry that you're looking to, the career, the role, whether it's product, whether it's engineering, whether it's research, whatever it may be, and help that, leverage that to create opportunities and multi-dimensional wins, as Mohammed was leaving off. And I'll let you continue, sir.
Well, thank you so much, Kyle. I think you said it very well. So yeah, multi ones, right? So some people think about just me winning and my company is winning, and you didn't think about anyone else in the industry. No, guess what? The better the industry is, the better your company will be. So that's very important to keep in mind, even if they are competitors. Think about the market in general, not just you or your company. So okay, my major is not suitable for the market. We touched about that a little bit. Try to have this learning attitude, and there's no shame of starting from zero, right? It's totally fine. I worked in industries that I don't know about, and I tried my best, and at least I succeeded to do some tasks, to do some projects myself. So that's very important to do. You can't get everything. The world doesn't revolve around yourself alone. Not even Earth right now. So also maintain an open mind attitude to different people. one thing that I did, which was wrong, is not giving some people who are older than me the possibility or the chance to teach me something, some lessons in the industry. But with time, I learned a lot from that, and I try to ask even more those people to give me those advices, because you will not get it from another company in the other side of the world, especially if you are providing, if your company is providing something unique for your industry. Surround yourself with the best in the market. We've said that, and of course, get your hands dirty. That's very important. There is no shame of going down. I went to the junk, right? So I went literally to the junk, and I get my hands, even my face, my clothes dirty, just to understand, the market, and I got only around $200. That wasn't worth it. So, but the experience, it was magical, to be honest. Shall I pay for the company? Yes and no. Sometimes you might need to pay for some items, at least for the company, and the company might compensate for that, of course, within a certain period of time. And sometimes you shouldn't, because companies might be a little bit greedy to get more from you, because they see, oh, this guy is really kind, and he's giving his own money, his own salary that we are giving him, which should be larger, but we are giving him a very small salary. And even though he's providing for the company, no, you shouldn't do that. At least do your proper assessment for the company, and of course the proper assessment for the financial status of the company, because that's very important. And why I'm pointing out this, because sometimes you have to do things yourself, especially in the SME sector. And for myself, I like the SME sector because it gives me a lot of experience, to be honest. I wouldn't have this experience in a larger company, and I worked in larger companies and multinational companies, but man, this experience that I get in SME, I don't get it anywhere else. And that's part of me going from a receptionist to a GM, right? So if I turn to a larger company, I would wait for around 20 years maybe to get this position. But with the experience, with a larger experience, you can get it very fast, especially if you are, working hard to develop yourself. Self-development here is very important and crucial. So, and a very important point here is the balance between technical and business knowledge, right? So you have business knowledge. You can convince people. You can manage people. You can persuade customers. You can do the contracts. Fine. What about the technical side? Because if you are low in technical, in the tech side, right, you will be accused of misrepresentation, at least by yourself. And that doesn't lead to good operational management. If you know the inside of the technical knowledge or the tech that you have, you can lead even your company, your internal management, because they care about how they do things, not how the things in general are being done. And if you don't have this business knowledge, you will be in a way not in line with the larger scope of the company, because the company is going in one way, and you are just thinking about the technicalities of the machine is not working, or this machine should be changed from this position to that position, or the gauge should be this number, and so on and so forth. The balance between the two is very important, and involve yourself into details, right? So get some very old guys that are working in this industry, and ask them, or in your factory, and ask them about the details. Try to spend more time, especially at your first, if you are first in your career, try to spend more time at your work, because that pays off a few years later, and you have a lot of energy as a youth. So why wasting it on other things that might not be of importance? So some stories which I labeled professional wars and victories. I would talk about some examples, not all, but some, and I wouldn't mention the names. But throughout the years, and being sometime not that active and sometimes very active, I learned that there are actually some professional wars, and some people doesn't go along with other people very easily, and that might take a shape of turning down a meeting that you requested. That might take a shape of the company policy doesn't support this. That might take the shape, this is not creative enough. That might take the shape, well, this is not under your responsibilities. It might take different shapes, and we all understand that. But how can we, get along with those people, or at least if we are to have those wars, professional wars in your company? How can we, or with different companies, by the way, you can have a partnership with different company. You still have some kind of, somebody in that company doesn't like you, and you are on top of this project, and you don't know how you can, go around this. Well, try different, of course, techniques. Try to support yourself with the right resources. When I'm talking about resources here, I'm not talking about, money or the tons of irons that you have in your factory. No, I'm talking about the resources that you should have to win the argument, at least with this person, or at least take this person to a position where they should act, they should move ahead, they should do something. For example, one time I had this fight about increasing my salary. I joined one company, and it turned out that I was around 50 to 60% lower than everybody else who graduated from the same university and having the same major and everything identical. And I was even at the company before them, so it wasn't that good to know. And I was satisfied, not much satisfied, but I agreed to the lower salary because it was fine at the time. But when I learned that, it was kind of deceiving, right? Because why would you do that? It's not logical. And some companies might think about the payroll a lot of the time, but if you are making your employees happy, they will provide you with 1,000% performance. I certainly believe in that. I've seen people that they worked under me, and some were my colleagues. They were very, very excited just because the fact that you or the manager dealt with them very well in terms of he respected them, or she respected them, and also they gave them the salary that they think they deserve. And it's very important also that you don't exaggerate about the salary, because if the company wants to employ you and you give them this skyrocketed number, they will not think about it. They would think that you are outside the world. You are not grounded, you are not practical. And of course there are different jealous colleagues everywhere, and it, one time I had this jealous colleague of mine in one company. He was trying to get me fired, uh, but fortunately, he was he was fired at the end. I had nothing to do with that, but it was sudden. And how I dealt with that is to be as much as possible standing on numbers, standing on facts, standing on things that you actually did, right? So that will help you a lot when you go to the general manager or the CEO or whatever, the owner of the company, and to resolve this problem, or to ask you, hey, I don't think you've done anything for the company. You would tell them, yes, I don't think that's an accurate representation, and here's why. Here are the reasons. I can present you this and that, and this time I've done this, and so on and so forth. Deception and lobbying, of course, there are different kind of professional laws in any company, including deception of the HR might. In some cases, it's not always. This is, but I faced that, to be honest, where at time I worked without a contract, and after around a few months, the company told me that, hey, we signed the contract late, so we will not count the days and the months that you've worked with us before. So I was pissed off, and of course, whenever you have any fights with any person in the company, wherever this person is in the hierarchy, you should be very accurate and precise and supported with numbers. And you need to describe the things in a very good way, thinking about the relationship between or the relations between the different colleagues of yours, because that's very important. That's key. That's key for winning or for getting the victory. And guess what? Afterwards, they told me, hey, yes, we will recognize the months that you worked in previous to the actual signing of the contract. So that went well. Of course, there will be some lobbying, especially from the higher ranking members, that they think of you as a threat to them, but you need to make them relax and tell them that this is for the good of the company at large, and this is for the good of him or her as a bonus, at the end of the month or year. So try to involve them in your project, not to think about you as a threat to their existence. And you might be a threat to their existence, to be honest. But and so, all right. Building yourself for the next move, you think about different aspects of it. You think about the work that you do at the time. And I always advise that you have to work for the moment and think of the future, because that will keep you motivated to do whatever you are doing at the moment. And that will also give you reason to reach something even larger and even higher in the ranks or for the company at large. And the next move might be in the same company. It doesn't have to be in different company, by the way. The same move, you might be promoted. So never provide more than you get for the company. And as we mentioned at first, some people might give the company more than the company deserve, actually, and that's very wrong. You are going nowhere. Trust me, you are going nowhere. And one thing that I like a lot, and this is the first time I'm talking about it, which is the collective egoism of the company and of the people that you are working with. Try to tap into that. And what I mean by that is everybody in any market whatsoever, they like to think about themselves as one group. we are working in this group, we are working in this market, we are the X and Y and Z company, we are this department, right? We are this group of employees that we are going into lunch together every day. So try to tap into that and feed that with whatever they want. And of course, what they want within that context is more job, more work. I think we are out of time, right, Kyle?
We are at that hour.
Yes.
There's so much here, and I think you're bringing up so many good points. Is just go for it. It doesn't matter if it's a new industry, it's an old industry. Go for it. Be very, very mindful of how you do. But I mean, these 5 points: work for the moment and think for the future. Absolutely. I am a second example of that. You never let pride get in the way. It's the hardest thing to do, but the faster you learn that lesson, the better. And your personal brand being multidimensional, it does nothing but benefit you. And that pride, I mean, it takes, when you shift industries, and Mohammed, you spoke to this, when you shift industries, it doesn't happen overnight that you're back in it as you were before. It can take almost a decade, I've read in some reports, to restart in a new industry. It's okay. You'll be impatient. I am. Other people are. You'll be impatient, but it's okay. And I think it's good for people to hear that from you and I and others who have gone through this. But Mohammed, I thank you so much for telling your story today and your journey of where you've begun and to where you are today. It's absolutely outstanding to see the success, but also the trials you went through to get to where you are today, and how you're still thinking forward, because there's more to what your story has to offer than today. But where can everyone find you online, as we do have to wrap up, and our audience has been very generous to give us a ton of time today. So where can everyone find you online?
Yes, absolutely. You can find me online in LinkedIn, Mohammed Al Majid. And again, thank you, Kyle, and apologies again for the internet connection. This is the first time happening today. And of course, thank you, La Token and Elena for the generous time, and for the audience as well.
Wonderful. And we thank you as well. Internet issues happen. We're still not to perfect internet yet. That's another future episode of VCTV. We'll talk about that. But nonetheless, Mohammed, again, thank you for joining us today, telling us your journey. To you, our audience, thank you for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, make sure you click the subscribe button, give the videos a thumbs up. Also, reach out to Mohammed, myself, Elena, and the entire LA Token team. Thank you, Mohammed. Online, we're always available and love to hear from you what else we can do and any follow-ups to the conversation today. I'm Kyle Akat. A big thank you to Elena and to the entire LA Token team for making this happen today. I'll be back here tomorrow on another edition of VCTV.